Any question about homework? No? Okay. Okay, let's go back to sentiment analysis. Yeah, I explained to you. By the way, about the history of behavioral finance, I forgot to mention that Herbert Simon, a behavioral model of rational choice, it is a basically attack on the rational model of neoclassical economics. You know neoclassical economics, right? For neoclassical economics, they assume individuals are rational. But Herbert Simon says that individuals are maybe not that rational. It is too difficult, too costly for human mind to be rational in all ways. So people are basically rational in bounded way. So it is bounded rationality. But bounded rationality, in my opinion, the bounded rationality model is not Simon's original idea. Actually, some people already mentioned that long before Herbert Simon. For example, Austrian school. Austrian school, they have an Austrian business cycle theory. So in the Austrian business cycle theory, investors make mistakes systematically in boom and bust. In boom, they overinvest. In bust, they underinvest, something like this. So there is a systematic mistake because people cannot process all the information they have, and the people cannot make rational decisions. So systematic mistake, and they generate business cycle. Another one is economic calculation problem. This is very interesting. You know, Austrian schools are ultra-right, and not ultra-right. They're right-wing economists, like neoclassical economists. They are also writing. And the Austrian school and neoclassical economists both believe that we should believe in market. Okay, market is better than government, something like that. But they have a very different reason why we have to do so. For neoclassical economists, people are rational and market is efficient. So, of course, there are information economists. There are economists who pioneer the information economics, but neoclassical economists, the mainstream neoclassical economists believe in basically market and people are rational. Okay, their framework, and therefore they tend to, not everyone. Okay, there are left-wing neoclassical economists too as well, but they tend to believe that market is better than government. But Austrian economists, Austrian schools, they also believe in market, and they don't believe in central planning of the socialist or communist economies, but from the very different reason. They believe people are irrational, not so rational. Therefore, organized system like central planning are destined to fail. So it is better to rely on market. So they have a same conclusion, but from extremely different assumptions. So I think they mentioned limited liability or that behavioral assumption earlier than Simon. And by the way, Austrian school is still influential, and still there are many Austrian economists in Austrian school. And I talked about that, and then we define the investor sentiment, and then after we define investor sentiment, we relate investor sentiment with cross-sectional differences as written with two channels, sentiment based in demand shock and limits to arbitrage. Sentiment based demand shock means that some stocks are invest value some stock more subjectively than others, so the subjective valuation is more likely to be influenced by speculative demands. And then in addition, if there are limits to arbitrage, that sentiment-based demand shock make stock price deviate from fair prices and then remain so for the time being. Because it is hard to do arbitrage, hard to bet against the sentiment shock. And then from this we generate a series predictions like this. And then in order to test this prediction, we have to design a trading strategy based on this theory and check whether that trading strategy generates trading profit or not. In order to design a trading strategy based on this framework, we need two measures. First, we have to sort stock from safe, easy to arbitrage stocks to speculative, difficult to arbitrage stock. We have to sort the stock, and next we should be able to measure sentiment. Then, yes, sentiment. Then there is two ways to measure sentiment. First, we may do the bottom-up approach. We can ask people one by one, but there is sometimes without relying on some technology that is usually costly and time-consuming. Indirect way is starts from a top-down approach. So in this paper, we take top-down approach, and in top-down approach, the idea is that we collect data. We collect variables. They are not directly investor sentiment. We collect data. They are not directly investor sentiment, but still they are possibly correlated with the investor sentiment. So they are indirectly related with investor sentiment. And then once we collect those variables, they are all variables. They are indirectly related to the investor sentiment, like number of firms listed in the market or implied volatility. They are not sentiment itself. They are not sentiment themselves, but they are related with sentiment, investor sentiment somehow. So the idea is that we brainstorm the list of variables that are correlated with investor sentiment. So we have a collection of the data, collection of variables, and then we somehow extract the common factor that moves everything together. Since they are all the common theme across this variable is investor sentiment. So if we could find some hidden factor that moves everything together, that should be investor sentiment, right? And then there are statistical techniques that extract the hidden factor, hidden underlying invisible factor. That is, for example, we have like Kalman filtering or principal component analysis. They are not so difficult. Once you have data and you just type comment in some statistical package, then you can generate one-time series that is investor sentiment. So that is basic idea. Okay, any question? So they are the list of, this one is a list of variables that are correlated. They are not sentiment, but correlated with investor sentiment. First one is the number of listed company. So they are all in the same group, number of listed firms or IPO. We can believe IPO is not investor sentiment, but it is possible that IPO activity is possibly related to investor sentiment because people do IPO when they believe they can sell stock at high price, and then in that situation is likely to be when investor sentiment is high. Another one is like momentum. Momentum is in academia. People don't believe momentum is investor sentiment, but I did an interview with financial expert in Korean, and they said momentum is their measure of investor sentiment. So anyway, I included it. And then foreign activities of foreign investors. In Korean market, foreign investors, global investors are, we believe, like they are more smart money. They are smarter or they are more informed than domestic investors. So it is possible that the activities of foreign investors are leading indicators for the Korean retail investors or Korean market. So we include the activities of foreign investors. And then we also include KOSPI index. KOSPI is like KOSPI firms are big firms. KOSDAQ firms are small firms, like technological firms. So we divided the KOSPI 200 by KOSDAQ index. And again, this is not often used in academia to measure sentiment, but in practice, people use it. So anyway, included it. KKR, KOSPI 200 divided KOSDAQ. and the discount rate of ETF. So ETF, I'll skip this one. So it is basically, yeah, I skip it. And the put call ratio. Put call ratio is the, yeah, put call ratio is possibly investor sentiment. Again, put call ratio is not in academia, but I believe put call ratio possibly important because people buy put option when they believe there is downside risk in future. Like put option is right to sell something at higher price, at some price, right to sell some asset at some specific price. So it is like insurance. Insurance is basically put option. So people will buy insurance when people feel uncertain, right? People have concern about downside risk. On the other hand, the call option is right to buy something at a specific price. So unless people are optimistic, okay, they will not buy call option. Right? So call option is like betting on the positive shock, the stock price. So I think put call ratio is possibly a measure for investor sentiment. So I included it. And then this one, percent of stock that is above 20 days moving average. Well, again, is from my interview as well. And turnover ratio. Turnover is like trading volume. It is a trading volume divided by number of stocks. So it means per stock transaction, number of changing hands per stock. So again, just as people visit casino when their sentiment is high, people will invest the stock market when their sentiment is high. Therefore, if we can observe the trading behavior in the market, whether people trade a lot or not, people trade much or not, then maybe somehow we can capture underlying investor sentiment. So I included the trading behavior. And then, yeah, I'll skip this. And then, I can skip this. And then lastly, the log ratio evaluated the average market book ratio, the dividend payer, non-payers. So it's a valuation gap, the last one. The last one is a valuation gap between dividend paying firm and non-dividend paying firm. So stock price is discounted, cash discounted future dividend flow. So if there is a lot of dividend, then so portion of dividend is high over stock price. Then since future stock price anyway discounted future dividend cash flow. So if we have a dividend today, a lot of dividend today, then it is more tangible. So it should be easier to calculate stock price. But if a firm doesn't pay any dividend right now, then we have to somehow project future dividend cash flow, and that would be more difficult if a firm doesn't pay dividend, right? So I think that is also a possibility. So valuation gap between dividend paying firm and non-dividend paying firm should be measure investor sentiment. Any other suggestion? So anyway, so we have a list of those stocks, and from this list, we apply principal component analysis or Kalman filtering approach, and then we extract a factor that moves everything together. And then this is a technical step-by-step process. And then at this stage, I don't think you don't have to know this at this time. And this is an example. This is a United States. This is so in Bacon, Wigler, and U.S. economists, they did exactly the same thing. They collected the list of those variables, and they did principal component analysis and extracted the common factor, and that is investor sentiment, and they plot that investor sentiment, and this is the one. Okay, so this is investor sentiment that Bacon, Wigler estimated, and this is very interesting. So investor sentiment is high, the late 60s and then late 60s and then low late 70s and again high early mid 80s and then high at this period and low afterwards. And then this one actually, so I mean, we can be curious why sentiment is particularly high at this period, particularly low at this period, and then we can take a look at economic history of the United States, and that history somehow matches the pattern of investor sentiment. For example, the late 60s, in this case, there is a boom in franchising, computing, and then home mobile manufacturers. There's a boom for such sectors, and this investor sentiment boom match that boom in the manufacturing sector. And then look at this one. Investor sentiment is particularly low at late 70s. And what happened in the late 70s? Yes, Heiko? Yes, oil crisis is one example. And then in line with oil crisis, there is a bubble bust in late 70s. So again, that busting bubble and oil crisis that matches somehow low investor sentiment. And investor sentiment becomes again high in early 80s because after oil crisis, energy prices goes up and then, yes, Kevin? Yeah. Beg your pardon? What bubble? Yeah, yeah. There is a stock market bubble there and then asset price bubble. All right. So, you know, there was a golden period from 60s to 80s, a golden period of capitalism, global capitalism. And then it is the end of that golden period somehow. So that was this period of from like 50 to 60 after World War II and until the late 70s. That was the best period for capitalism. There's a economic growth of the German economic growth, and then Japanese economy and U.S. economic growth like almost 3% every year consistently. So that was the best period, and then it is the end of that golden period. So anyway, about early 80s and after energy crisis, well, energy crisis means the oil price is too high, right? And then energy prices were very high, so like energy developers, okay? Like mining firms, oil firms, their stock price went up, and there was early boom. There was also in early 80s, there was boom for high-tech and biotech sectors in early 80s. Of course, some right-wing economists believe that it is because Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher, or the actor president Ronald Reagan. Okay, some people believe they were the people who generated this boom, but some people don't believe it. Anyway, there's a boom in high-tech and biotech industry and explorer. And then there was a good time, and then down, and then there is another pike at late 19 and early 2000. And what happened at the time? Yeah, there was dot-com bubble. Yeah, dot-com bubble. And then dot-com bubble matches that investor sentiment, right? At that time, maybe you guys were maybe too long at the time, but early 2000, there was crazy valuations in the U.S. dot-com, Kosdaq, and Nasdaq, dot-com sector. Most of the firms at that time, as Nasdaq or startup, most of startups at the time didn't make any money. They are losing money, but their valuation was like incredible, okay? Dot-com bubble, dot-com, yeah, dot-com. So all the internet firms end with a dot-com, Amazon.com, Google.com, right? Something like that. So this is called a dot-com bubble. So yeah, we generated investor sentiment, they plot investor sentiment like this, and interestingly, this pattern matches very well with U.S. economic history, which means that this investor sentiment from the principal component analysis is not a nonsense at all. Okay, they capture very important thing in economy, right? And then since we generated, so okay, we measure the investor sentiment and we find that investor sentiment somehow matches economic history of US. So that is like makes sense. And then next we can test this one, right? We can test this one. Yeah, we have investor sentiment. We can measure investor sentiment. So we know when there is a high sentiment and when there is low sentiment, and we can able to sort the stock like this. And therefore, next step is we can check whether indeed the stock price move like this. This in high sentiment. We can check whether, because we can measure now investor sentiment and sort the stock. Next step is we can see whether indeed the valuation change this way in high sentiment and this way in low sentiment. We can do that. And Bacon Wheeler, they indeed find this is right. Okay, so this is their result. This result, I'm sorry, this is written in Korean, so I didn't have time to translate this one in English, but let me explain one by one. So this one is that to list their finding one by one. First, they find that small stocks. They find that small stocks are more influenced by the sentiment. That makes sense, right? Small stocks are more influenced by investor sentiment, and small stock prices of a small stock goes up when investor sentiment is high, and the big stock tends to be undervalued when investor sentiment is high. Okay. So large stock and small stock, and then this one. When investor sentiment is low, large cap stocks tend to be relatively overvalued, and then small stocks tend to be undervalued. Why? It is natural because small stocks are more subjectively valued. They are likely to be more subjectively valued because for large stock, there are many stock analysts. For Apple, I believe there are 1,000 stock analysts in the world. Maybe more than 1,000, more than 10,000. For GM and Ford, those companies, there are every major bank and then brokerage firm have analysts for those big car makers. But imagine for small stock in the Nasdaq, there are a lot of stock in Nasdaq, and there are very small companies, and maybe no major stock analysts are interested in analyzing those stocks. So basically, there are different amount of information available. In large firm, there is a good quality information produced by stock analysts, and for small firm, there are not so that information. Therefore, when investors invest in those stocks, we should do valuation. And since there is a lot of information for large stock, we can do more scientific, objective valuation. But for small stock, we don't have information. So we have to be more speculative, subjective in valuing stock. So comparing large and big stock, that pattern exactly matches this prediction. And another is age of the firm. Age of the firm also matters. For the firm with long history, since there is long history, it means we have more data, right? Since we have more data, we can do more objective valuation. So they are less influenced by investor sentiment, and they are overvalued when there is a low sentiment, and undervalued when there is high sentiment. But for young firm, we don't have a long history. So since we don't have a history, it means we don't have much data. It means we have to do more subjective evaluation. Right? Does it make sense? So And third one is variation in profitability. Okay? Variation in profitability. So some firms' profitability, pattern of profitability is similar across years, over time. Then, we can extend that one into the future, and we can do the valuation. But for some stock, profitability is very uncertain, fluctuates a lot. Then it is more difficult to estimate future cash flow, right? because in the current data, historical data, there's more noise and fluctuation. So it means in future there is also a lot of noise and fluctuation. So it is very hard to do the valuation correctly. So we have to rely on more subjective valuation. So fluctuation in profitability is also So stocks with high profitability fluctuation are most subject to investor sentiment. And similarly, stocks with low dividend, they are also subject to the sentiment. And then intangibles. If a firm has a lot of intangibles, well, intangibles are more difficult to do the valuation than tangibles. So if a firm has a lot of intangibles, like high stock price to book, high market value to book value ratio, then those firms are also more likely to be, if a firm has therefore a lot of intangibles, it means they are more likely to be subjective valued and therefore more likely to be influenced by investor sentiment. Something like that. So that also exactly matches our prediction. Any question? Want to know? Is it okay, right? Angelica, any question? It's okay, easy, right? And then there is a very interesting pattern like R&D ratio and market to book ratio and leverage amount of the debt and then growth rate of sales. They are very interesting because for those variables, when they are either very low or very high, they are affected by sentiment a lot. When they are intermediate values, they are less likely to be affected by sentiment. So it is like monotone relationship. When those values have extreme values, then they are more likely to invest, more likely to be influenced by investor sentiment. And let's think of why is this so. For example, R&D. If a firm has very low R&D, if a firm doesn't do any RA, or if a firm do a lot of RA, and then investor sentiment affects those firms a lot. Why is that? So investor sentiment affects stock price a lot if a firm has a very low R&D expense or very high R&D expense. Why is that? Any idea? Well, it is a difficult question because even in their paper they didn't explain why we have this pattern. So, any idea? Why do you think? Let's think of one by one. They argue that if a firm has a very high R&D expense, then they are likely to be influenced by sentiment. Any guess about that? If a firm has very high R&D, what kind of firm has very high R&D? Okay, Kevin. Yeah. So therefore, yeah. Okay, that's a good guess. So imagine a firm does a lot of R&D investment. Then when we do the valuation for the firm, then we have to have some model, some idea how that R&D investment generates future cash flow, something like that, right? And then so that is likely to be hard. That can be very hard. Okay, we have to have a conjecture. We have to do conjecture on how that intensive R&D expenditure generates future cash flow. And then a firm must have done this huge R&D expenses because they believe they have growth opportunity or another intangible or other investment opportunity. Otherwise, they shouldn't do the R&D investment, right? And then therefore we have to evaluate those factors, and those factors are hidden intangibles. So it is very hard to do those evaluations. So it means those firms with very high R&D expenditures are likely to be affected by investor sentiment. Again, yeah, as Kevin says, high R&D firms, they are innovative firms, and innovation By the definition of innovation, it is very hard to do valuation of innovation, right? But the more difficult one is a firm with very low R&D expenditure. A firm, for example, which doesn't do any R&D is also likely to be affected by investor sentiment. Why is that? That's very interesting. Yeah. Which firm doesn't do any R&D? If firm doesn't do any R&D, it means that they don't believe in future, right? Something like that. So if a firm believes they have growth opportunity or good investor want opportunity, then they should do some R&D, right? If they believe they have internal capability of generating future cash flow, then they should do some R&D. But they don't. It means that those firms are likely very distressed firms. Right? Firms with great difficulties. Right? If a firm is in great difficulty, then their prospect is very uncertain. Therefore, they are likely to be subject to the investor sentiment. I don't know, this is my guess. Any thought? Do you want to comment on this? Okay. And another one is the market value to book value ratio. Okay. Another one is this one. So any pen. And another one is like ratio between stock price and book value. Okay, market value and book value. If a ratio between market value and book value is very high, it is subject to sentiment. Or it is extremely low, it is also likely to be subject to sentiment. It makes sense. If the ratio is very high, if a firm's stock price is very high compared with their book value, it means that firm includes a lot of intangibles. And then intangibles are more likely to be valued subjectively, therefore they are likely to be what? Subject to sentiment more. That makes sense. But interestingly, the firm with very low, okay, very low market book ratio is also subject to the investor sentiment. Why is that? Let's think about what kind of firm has very low market value compared with book value. What kind of firm is that? So they are extreme value firm. If market price of the stock market of a firm is very low compared with the book value or asset value, what would be the if you are, let's assume that you are a strategy consultant from McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group, Bain. Suppose you are a strategy consultant and you are consulting a firm, and then you find that the firm's stock price is highly undervalued, very low compared with its asset value. What would be your recommendation? Possible recommendation? Laura? Any thought? If market value of a firm is very low compared with their just asset value or replacement value or book value, what would be your recommendation to the firm? That is partially right. Yeah, that is more of a corporate radar idea than management consultant, like private equity investors. Those are like corporate radar. Do you know corporate radars? Acquire a company, M&A a company, and dissect the company and sell piece by piece to others. So your idea is basically the PF or corporate radar approach. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that is also PF approach, corporate radar approach. Buy the company, and the idea, both of your ideas are common. So stock price is very low compared with asset value. So then investor the holding cash inside the firm or having asset inside the firm, they simply redistribute asset to the investors, shareholders. Because anyway, asset value is higher than their stock market value, so it is better to liquidate firm sometimes, right? Stock liquidate, beg your pardon? Yeah, to sell that because asset value is even higher than their stock market value, so it is ideal. So basically, it is maybe better to sell just the company, liquidate the company, and return the asset to the company, right? Owners of the firm, shareholders. To shareholders, value of the firm is the stock price, right? But then the asset value is higher, even higher than that. Then what they do is instead of trading stock, they will just sell the asset, right? That is maybe a better idea, right? So those firms which have a very low market value and high book value, and they are likely to be very, I don't know, very undervalued, and then they are very inefficiently managed, or they are in the distress. So it means they are likely to be subject to the investor sentiment. And this one is another one. Next one is very, I have no good explanation about that. When a firm uses a lot of debt, they are likely to be influenced by sentiment. But when they use very low debt or no debt, then they are again subject to investor sentiment. My thought is that when a debt is very high, leverage is very high, it means that that firm is maybe close to default or something like that, right? If a firm is in high leverage, then highly leveraged firms are riskier than low leverage firms, right? And since they are riskier, and therefore they are likely to be subject to investor sentiment more. Okay, that makes sense. But more difficult part is this one. If a firm has very low leverage, if a firm doesn't borrow any money from the bank, for example, then they are also very likely to be subject to investor sentiment. That's very interesting. Why is that? Do you have any guess about this one? Any guess? Yes?
I think investors think that this company has no ability to get.
Yes, that's my guess as well. Yeah, good suggestion. The idea is that, well, a company doesn't borrow any money. One reason is that maybe they don't have to borrow money. Possibility one. Another possibility, they cannot borrow money, right? If they cannot borrow money, it means that maybe they are in trouble. Therefore, no banks want to lend money to those funds. Then it is possible that they are likely to be affected by investor sentiment. Okay. But anyway, we don't have any clear reason explanation about this. And another interesting sales growth. If a sales growth is very high or very low, they are subject to investor sentiment. If a sales growth is very high, it is growth form. Okay, so it is growth form. So growth form, therefore, it is maybe difficult to the valuation. Okay, if sales growth is very high and it is growth form, and then we have to do the valuation on the growth option inside the firm or investment opportunity inside of the firm, and that may be difficult. We have to do subjective valuation. And if sales growth is very low, it means that sales growth is possibly shrinking. If sales growth is shrinking, then again that firm is in trouble. People have a fear or uncertainty in those firms, and they may be subject to investor sentiment. Okay, it makes sense, right? And the interesting is the Bacon Wigler, the US economist, also they analyzed liquidity, trading volume, and other liquidity measures for those firms. And they find that indeed, if a firm is subject to the high investor sentiment, they tend to have a low liquidity. If a firm is not influenced by investor sentiment much, and those stocks have high liquidity. So it exactly matches the theory. Okay? Anyway, this is very interesting. It means that we can possibly generate trading profit. We have measures of investor sentiment with principal component analysis, which is very easy. So once we measure investor sentiment and by observing investor sentiment carefully and by figuring out when investor sentiment is high and when investor sentiment is low, then we can do the composite opposite trading. We can trade those small stock versus big stock, young stock versus old stock, and then volatile stock and safe stock, and then in stocks with intangibles and no intangibles, and then R&D stock, no R&D stock, something like that. Okay, so we can trade those stocks and possibly could be able to make money. So this is very interesting finding. Any comment about this one? Yes. 네. 그렇죠. Very good question. So her question is the investor sentiment, the leading indicators, and so they should predict the behavior of those stocks in future. Okay, in their stock. Okay, in their paper, Bacon-Wigler, they didn't analyze the leading predictability of investor sentiment much. That's what I did. What I just explained is their concurrent relationship. They analyze when investor sentiment is high, what happened? When investor sentiment is low, what happened? Is their estimation. But my thought is that, again, sentiment is what? Sentiment should be temporary. No sentiment lasts forever. Right? Even love, okay, psychologists or many, I don't know how to say in English, not biologist, many doctors analyze love, and then they believe love is the functioning hormone, dopamine, and there are two hormones that generate love, okay, and that hormone lasts. The power of the hormone doesn't last more than 2 years. Right? So that's the valid period for love. Even love doesn't last more than 2 years. Right? How about other sentiments? They should last even less. Right? So do you have any objection to the idea? Do you believe love lasts forever? Well, yeah. You know, some people do that. Some people love each other forever. Right? And that. So love is maybe more than hormone, but anyway, yes. So anyway, sentiment doesn't last forever. Right? Sentiment doesn't last forever. Therefore, if we can find a concurrent relationship, there should be opposite pattern in the future. So that is my guess, and this is what I tested. So what I just explained is a concurrent, simultaneous relationship, and since the sentiment doesn't last forever, it means that if due to sentiment, if small stock price goes up a lot, it means that in some time later, that stock should go down. Okay. Of course, in Bacon-Wigler's paper, they did some preliminary analysis, and they found it is 1 month. Like 1 month. After 1 month, everything changes. So valid period for sentiment in their analysis is like 1 month. In my analysis, I did a weekly analysis. Sentiment change even in week. In Korea. Maybe it is Korean sentiment changes faster than American sentiment. I don't know. But. So any other comment? By the way, about the love thing, love and hormone thing, you know, psychologists believe that, again, the love is because of hormone, two hormones. And the interesting thing is that that hormone also exists in animals. So it means that animals can love each other. Right? The animals have that hormone when they are in the period for what? Period for the mating. Okay? And during the period they have that hormone. So somehow the love and mating season are very correlated in animal. And for human, we don't have a specific mating season. So it is like always. Right? Any question? Any other question? Yeah. And then this is Korean sentiment. I did analysis of Korea. And there is a 6 figures in this page, and this red line is the investor sentiment I measured. So this red line is this one in similar to this one in United States. So I measure this one, and the black one is the original data. So this black one is time series, and after collecting this black one, and I extract the red one. But it would be interesting if I compare the red one, which is sentiment, and the individual variable. Like ETF discount rate, they move with sentiment together, or sometimes not. And this turnover ratio, interestingly, turnover ratio is also moved together with sentiment. And then IPO activities, and then what I found is implied volatility is very important. Implied volatility. It is, again, implied volatility is the valuation of derivatives, basically. And people buy derivatives when they have a fear or uncertainty in the future, right? And those implied volatility explain the sentiment. This implied volatility and sentiment I measured tend to move together a lot. So implied volatility is very important, I found. And momentum is the other way. Ownership of the foreign investors' ownership, how active foreign investors are, they are also very interesting because they move in opposite way to the investor sentiment. So therefore, indeed, foreign investors are leading in foreign investor activities are leading indicators for the sentiment. Okay, when Korean investors feel happy, then foreign investors know it is time to leave. When Korean investors are depressed, then foreign investors think, okay, now is the time to enter. So they are kind of smart money, and they are leading indicator. They move before the Korean investors, possibly. So this is very interesting. Yeah. Any question? Yeah.
I want to know how you could measure the sentiment.
Yes, again, I measure sentiment after I collecting this black one. Okay, after I collect the variables that are likely to be correlated to the investor sentiment, once I collect them, and then I do some statistical analysis to extract the common factor, and I define that as sentiment. Because I collected the variable they are related to the investor sentiment, and if there is hidden force that move everything together, that should be the investor sentiment, because that is the common theme for the variable I collected. Any question? Any other question? So actually, principal component is frequently used in finance. So how can I explain this? Let me use an example, a bit melodramatic example. Yeah. Okay, suppose, let's assume that there is a very pretty girl. Okay, let's assume that there is a very pretty girl. Okay, and we are interested in the movement of this pretty girl. But problem is that we cannot directly observe this pretty girl. But instead, we can observe behavior of the boys. Okay, boy 1, boy 2, and there are other guys. And the guys are all interested in this girl, or they all like this pretty girl. Let's assume that. And then, although we cannot observe the movement of this girl, but we can observe the movement of these boys. Okay, that's our data. Then, although, so they all like this girl, so therefore, our idea is like this. We can track the movement of each guy, and therefore some people may go to restaurant, or some guy may go to school, or they have all different schedule, right? All different schedules, so they don't move together. But idea is that if in some case they move all together, then they are likely to be because of that girl, right? Although they have all different schedule or their personal matter, but if there is a common movement between these guys, then it should be because of the girl. Because I collected the data about guys who are interested in the pretty girl, right? In particular, okay, so in particular, if there is a particular guy, this guy is always in the group. When a particular group all move together, then this guy is particularly the best indicator for this girl, right? Again, we want to capture common movement of across this guy. And when there is a majority of guys, in some cases, majority of guys move together, and this guy is always in that group, and this guy should be the best indicator. Therefore, when we calculate the hidden movement of this girl, we give this guy the most weight, like 90%. Okay, something like that. And the next one, next to this guy also not as much as this guy, but also if this guy tends to participate in the major core movement, then we should also give a high weight, something like this, 80%. And then by assigning weight for the movement of each guy and collect them, then we can estimate the hidden movement of the girl. That's the principal component analysis. Something like this, some version of this. We just do this analysis mathematically. So, any question? Okay, next one. Yeah. Also, sentiment is above 20 average, and this is the interesting one is cost-peak-cost ratio. Well, existing economic literature didn't use like this valuation ratio, cost-peak-cost, but I find the industry people has some wisdom, and in the end, people in the industry is maybe they are not as smart as people in academia, but they are not dumb anyway. So somehow their measure is also highly correlated sentiment. So indeed, it is important sentiment measure. And put-call ratio, well, I believed it is very important, and sometimes it is a mirror image of investor sentiment, but it is not that strong as I believed, the put-call ratio. But still, it contains some information about sentiment, right? There's exactly a move opposite. So it is a sentiment opposite information. So negative information or sentiment. And this is the most important one. So in the end, now I compare stock prices and then sentiment. Stock price and sentiment. What I find is that this red one and green one, I use two ways to measure sentiment. I run two types of principal component analysis, and I generate two investor sentiment, the red one and green one. And this black one is valuation of Korean stock market. And look at this. Okay, they are opposite images, kind of. They're opposite of each other. And then stock price and sentiment move together. And more interesting thing is, although it is not visible, not clearly visible in this figure, actually sentiment moves slightly before the stock price move. Okay, it is not clear in this one, but the sentiment moves slightly earlier than, the stock price, which means that sentiment has predictability power on the stock price as our theory postulates. It means that it in turn implies that, maybe if we can use sentiment and design a trading strategy in smart way, then maybe we can generate trading profit. That also. And then I did analysis for trading profit, and then I don't have time, so let's analyze the trading profit based on sentiment next week. Any question about today's topic? 네, 질문 있어요? Okay, thank you and see you next week.